Hello, my name is Kevin Burmeister. 20 years ago, on one of my first trips to Israel, I was privileged enough to visit the city of David and take a tour of the underground excavations that were taking place at the time. I was so enthralled with the place that I committed to helping and assisting, and I became a benefactor of some of these digs. And after 15 years I've been committed to excavation on the eastern slopes of the city of David. I've worked with 5 archaeologists. I've written 50 odd articles on the particular findings. And tonight I hope to inspire you with some of the findings that we have recently located. Firstly, I'm going to give you some introduction to the areas around this excavation. On the left-hand side, you see a view of the old city. This is the Temple Mount, the Mount of Olives, of course the quarters, the 4 different quarters of the old city, the Ottoman walls built around the old city. This here being the city of David, and here we are, Silwan. On this side, by the way, we're looking here to the south, to Beit El, to Bethlehem, and to Hebron. On the north view, looking towards the north, towards the modern day Beit El in 10 kilometers north of Jerusalem, and to Shechem, much further to the north. In both these images, this is the area we're going to focus on tonight, over here in this image and over here in this image, which is on the eastern slopes of Mount Moriah. This view here of Mount Moriah will give you some idea. Firstly, it's a single rock. The rock starts at the top of the Temple Mount, which is up in this area here, and it goes all the way to the bottom to the Shiloach, and drops from about 740 meters above sea level to about 620 meters, 24 meters above sea level. The topography of the rock clearly identifies that it's a single rock. Very steep eastern sides that drop down quite significantly, about 50 meters, and the steep elevation of the mountain gives a natural protection to people living on the top of the mountain. Recently, there was a discovery of a trench that was dug across the neck of the mountain, and that trench is thought to be a defensive trench, which was built in the Bronze Age periods. Now, what's very interesting and important to note, that the mountain here fits in with the times of Noah, Melchizedek, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but particularly during the period of 1790 before the Common Era to 1500 before the Common Era. That's about 3,700 years ago, 3,800 years ago. There is very little archaeology, all the way down to 3,500 years ago, that's found on the mountain. Most of the settlements occurred at the bottom of in the valley, at the Gihon Spring, the exit of the Gihon Spring into the valley, where the water source for this mountain was. And there are early settlements along the eastern slope, and that's about it. Nobody settles this mountain until much later, towards the end of the Bronze Age, the middle periods of the Bronze Age and the early Iron Age. And we see the development of a village. We see some walls and some settlements up on the top of the mountain. Of course, when that took place, the servicing of the populations who were living at the top of the mountains to defend themselves and to take advantage of the natural defenses of the mountain, they had to bring water up from the Gihon Spring every single day. That water had to be transported to service about 1,000 people, animals, food, cooking, washing. And so that was a significant undertaking, perhaps the first industrialization of water supply, through sacks and vessels that were carried up by water carriers every day. And the king, the one who had control of the mountain, essentially had control of the water. That's how he would retain his power. and service the growing population at the top of the mountain. Question is, why did King David choose this mountain? There are many mountains all over this area of Jerusalem. King David was king in Hebron to the south of those mountains for 7 years before he came to this mountain. And obviously he had a very good reason for coming to this mountain, particularly most likely because of its connection with the forefathers from the Torah, the Bible. You can see here the early development. This is the sort of stage we're talking about here relative to this development. And of course the continued development all the way to the present city with the Ottoman city walls, which are about 500 years old. Now there's a lot to take in this image here. Firstly, we'll start with Abram. Abram is said to have come from the north, from Haran, into this area here. And we know from the Bible that he moved onto the hill country east of Beit El and west of Ai. Now, in the same year that this excavation on the eastern slope of Mount Moriah was discovered, it's a temple installation. We're going to talk extensively about this tonight. At the same time, there was an excavation in Ras Al Amud, which is about a 17 or 18 dunam excavation, and it's really the time frame that could easily fit with the city of Ai. Nobody has ever conclusively defined where Ai is, or for that matter, where the ancient Beit El is. Many proponents have discussed that Ai and Beit El are 10 or 12 kilometers to the north of Jerusalem, but we're going to talk about Beit El here on the slopes of the ancient Jerusalem, and Ai being this location. Now, after Abram went to Egypt, to Mitzrayim, he came back to this location. He set his tent here at east of Beit El, west of Ai. On these two images, we can see a very prominent building on the top of this mountain, this being this location right over here. From an image in 1930s, and here in an image in 1901, we can see the same prominent building at the top of the mountain without the trees. But clearly there was a building here marking a very prominent spot. Now this building is owned by an Italian church. It goes back hundreds of years, and coincidentally they called this church the Tent of Abram Church. Abram battled the 4 kings and the 5 kings, the first recorded world war in history from the Bible. After the victory that he accomplished in that war, he came back to this location. He met up with Melchizedek, who was the high priest of Shalem, and he tithed. He gave 10% of his wealth to the priest of Shalem. Yirah comes from Abram, fear or sea to see, mountain of seeing, which comes from Abram, and Shalem comes from Melchizedek. The combination of Yirah Shalem is thought to be the origin of the name Jerusalem. Very important. We'll jump forward now to the time of Joshua, where Joshua comes to Israel, brings all the Israelites into Israel, and he takes over. He accomplishes the first victory over the city of Jericho. After that, the next recorded battle, is the Battle of Ai. They have an attempt to attack Ai. They fail in their first attempt, and then Joshua leads the army to success. In doing so, Joshua stands across on the peak of a hill across from Ai, overlooking a valley. He and his army set up an ambush party, and this location here would just be around the corner here. And he runs down the valley, and the king of Ai then pursues him, and Joshua decoys the king into the desert. They run into the desert. The king chases. Joshua's army into the desert. Of course, the city of Ai is left unattended by the army, and Joshua's ambush party comes up and sets the city alight. The king sees that the city is alight, turns around, goes back to his city. Of course, Joshua follows in pursuit and kills the king and the residents and destroys the city of Ai. So, very importantly, Ronnie Reich, who was the main archaeologist on the city of David for almost 15 years, recently wrote a book with Eli Shukron, who is the lead archaeologist on this particular site that we're going to talk about tonight or today. Ronnie writes that the name of this spring, which was once called the Gihon spring, was not really ever called Gihon. Gihon means a pumping spring or a gushing spring, and therefore it took on its title as Gihon. But the spring in the Bible is called Ein Shemesh, and he draws the boundaries of Benjamin from the book of Joshua, that the boundary descended to the full foot of the hill by the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is here. At the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. Then it ran down the valley of Hinnom along the southern flank of the Jebusites over here to Ein Rogel, which is the spring at the base, just a little bit southwest of the city of David, curving northward up into the city of David. Then it ran on to Ein Shemesh, which is the spring presently known as the Gihon, and then it ran on to Geliloth, facing the ascent of Adumim and into the desert. So this is the way that the border and the boundary is defined by Ronnie Reich between Judah and Benjamin, and that will become important in the next slides. This man here, Chagi Ben Artzi, and I met up recently. I took a tour of Chagi. Chagi has devoted, he's a professor, an archaeologist, a guide. He has devoted most of his life. He lives in Beit El, here to the north of Jerusalem, 10 kilometers to the north. And Chagi has been a proponent of the story that Jacob's Beit El, the story of Jacob and his relationship to Beit El, exists in the north. Whereas many of the commentators talk about Beit El here in Jerusalem, associate Beit El with the Mount Moriah, and so there is some reconciliation to be made. But Chagi and I have now spent some time together. I've taken him on a tour. He has all the information, and he's very, very impressed with what he's seen. And somehow we will spend some time together reconciling these major points of differences. But what you can see from this is that Beit El on the southern end of Benjamin is adjacent to the tribe of Judah, Yehuda, and on the northern end of Benjamin it's adjacent to the tribe of Ephraim, or from the family of Joseph. Now clearly these are dueling Beit Els. After King Solomon established the first temple, his son Rehoboam came to a disagreement with the northern Israel tribes, and Yerovam established his kingdom here in the north and really split the nation. At that point in time, the 10 tribes, the northern tribes of Israel, were separated from the southern tribes of Israel. And after that, the Assyrian exile occurred for the northern tribes of Israel, and following that, the Babylonian exile occurred for the southern tribes of Judah, and that has continued to be the case ever since that period of time. Now, what's interesting is that there's always been competition between these two tribes for the location of the temple. The temple was always going to be on the boundary of Benjamin, but for a long time it wasn't known as to whether the permanent temple would be on the northern boundary with Ephraim, or the southern boundary with Jerusalem. King David, of course, finished that and declared that it would be on the southern boundary. Now we're going to see a video, and we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at that. I'll slow it down for people who need to see the subtitles because the video is in Hebrew.
בלב ירושלים העתיקה נמצאת עיר דוד, אתר ארכיאולוגי שמספק גילויים מדהימים מדי שנה, אך תגלית מרתקת שנחשפה לאחרונה עשויה לשנות את כל מה שחשבנו שידענו על אחד המקומות הקדושים ביותר בתנ"ך. כל הסיפור מתחיל עם חשיפתו של מקדש אבן עתיק ויוצא דופן במורדות המזרחיים של עיר דוד. האם אנחנו באמת יודעים היכן נמצאת בית אל? אם נביט במפה, נמצא את בית אל המודרנית מצפון לירושלים, ליד הכפר הערבי ביתין. באמצע המאה ה-19 קישר הארכיאולוג הנודע אדוארד רובינסון בין הכפר ובין בית אל התנ"כית. רובינסון גילה את המיקום באמצעות כתבים מהמאה הרביעית לספירה, לפיהם בית אל ממוקמת 12 מילים רומיים מצפון לירושלים, וכמובן לפי הדמיון בשם. אבל מקריאה פשוטה של הפסוקים בתנ"ך זה לא בדיוק מסתדר. יעקב בורח לחרן מפני עשיו אחיו, והוא עוצר לישון וחולם חלום. בחלומו מופיע סולם מוצב ארצה וראשו מגיע השמיימה, ומלאכי אלוקים עולים ויורדים בו. כאשר יעקב מתעורר, הוא מקים מצבה וכורת ברית עם אלוקים. הוא קורא למקום בית אל, כלומר בית האלוקים. לאחר עשרות שנים חוזר יעקב לבית אל, לשם הוא מקבל באופן רשמי את השם ישראל. רבים מפרשני התנ"ך שמנסים להסביר את המסלול שעשה יעקב ואת השיפוע של הסולם, מגיעים אף הם למסקנה כי בית אל המזוהה עם יעקב אינה מצפון לירושלים, אלא בתוך ירושלים, על הר המוריה. ייתכן שהיו כמה ערים שנקראו בית אל, אבל היכן נמצאת בית אל של יעקב? האם מצפון לירושלים או כאן, על הר המוריה? ממצאים יוצא דופן שהתגלו בעיר דוד על מורדות הצלע המזרחית של הר המוריה, עשויים להיות המפתח לפתרון התעלומה, ואולי אפילו לפתרון תעלומה גדולה עוד יותר. בשטח C של החפירות בעיר דוד התגלה קומפלקס של מקדש אבן, ובו 4 חדרים בעלי מאפיינים ייחודיים לפולחן. הממצאים כוללים בית בד קטן להפקת שמן זית טהור, מכתש לדגנים, מצבה מורמת מעט עם תעלה לנוזלים, ומקום לשחיטה ולהכנה של קורבנות ותעלת מים. מאפיינים אלו שונים מהותית משל מקדשים פגניים שאנו מכירים, שפונים לכיוון השמש. מקום פולחן מונותאיסטי בעל מאפיינים דומים למקומות כאלה שמוזכרים בתנ"ך, הוא דבר יוצא דופן. מה שהופך את הגילוי לחריג עוד יותר, הוא התיארוך של שכבת הסלע ותעלת המים. זרעי חיטה וחומר אורגני שהשתמרו תחת שכבה של אפר, קצת מעל שכבת הסלע ובתעלת המים, עברו תיארוך פחמן 14 ותוארכו לתקופת הברונזה התיכונה, בין השנים 1605 ל-1510 לפני הספירה. במילים אחרות, המצבה הזו והמזבח אינן מתקופת הברזל, תקופתו של דוד המלך, אפילו לא מתקופת יהושע. הפעם האחרונה שעשו שימוש במצבה הזו היה בתקופת יעקב אבינו. אז של מי הייתה המצבה? עיון בפסוקים בספר בראשית שמתייחסים לעיר שלם, היא ירושלים, יוכל לתת לנו תובנות נוספות. ומלכי צדק מלך שלם הוציא לחם ויין, והוא כהן לאל עליון, ויברכהו ויאמר ברוך אברהם לאל עליון קונה שמיים וארץ, וברוך אל עליון אשר מיגן צריך בידיך, ויתן לו מעשר מכל. מודלים מתקדמים שנבנו על בסיס התיארוך מראים לנו גרף פעילות שמתאים לכתוב במקרא. קל להגיע למסקנה שמלכי צדק השתמש במקדש האבן, ולאחריו האבות, כולל יעקב, שהקים בו מצבה וקרא לה בית אל. קל להבין מדוע היה המקום הזה חשוב ומרכזי עבור האבות, וגם מובן מדוע החליט דוד המלך לכבוש אותו. אך הדבר רק מעלה שאלות נוספות. באופן תמוה ביותר, החפירות הארכיאולוגיות אינן מעידות על פעילות במקדש האבן לאחר מכן. לרבות בתקופת דוד המלך, אשר ניסה לפענח ביחד עם הנביאים, היכן צריך לבנות את בית המקדש הראשון. לבסוף הנביא גד מורה לו לבנות מזבח בראש הר המוריה, ושם נבנים בית המקדש הראשון והשני, שהופכים להיות המקום הקדוש ביותר לעם היהודי. כיצד ומתי עבד הקומפלקס הזה של מקדש האבן, ולא פחות תמוה, כיצד כנגד כל הסיכויים השתמרה מצבת אבן קטנה ושברירית במשך 3,500 שנה? כדי לענות על השאלה הזו, עלינו להבין את המבנה הטופוגרפי הייחודי של ההר ומורדותיו התלולים. הביטו אל קיר התמך המודרני והעצום הזה. קיר זה נבנה במטרה לבלום את כמויות האפר האדירות מליפול ולהיסחף ולכסות את אתר החפירות. הביטו גם אל חומות ההגנה העתיקות שנבנו כ1,000 שנים לאחר המקדש והמצבה. במילים אחרות, לא צריך יותר מכמה שנים של הזנחה כדי שמקום כזה יתכסה לחלוטין ויובד. כאשר חזרו בני ישראל ממצרים לארץ ישראל לאחר כ250 שנות גלות, הזיכרון של מקדש האבן ושל בית אל אבד. מקדש האבן בשלב הזה כבר היה מכוסה במפולת גבוהה יותר מאשר אדם שעומד על כתפי חברו. כל עוד המקדש והמצבה היו קבורים עמוק באדמה, המיקום של בית אל והמצבה הפכו להיות נחלת הדמיון. היה זה הערפל סביב המיקום של בית אל שאפשר למלך ירובעם, שמלך לאחר שלמה המלך, להכריז שבית אל נמצאת במקום אחר לחלוטין, מצפון לירושלים. שם בנה ירובעם מקדש עבודה זרה ופיצל את שבטי ישראל לממלכת שומרון הצפונית ולממלכת יהודה ושמעון. אבל אז, כ200 שנים לאחר מכן, במאה השמינית לפני הספירה, קרה דבר שאף אחד לא ציפה לו. אנחנו מדברים עכשיו על השנים שבין מלכות עוזיהו ומלכות חזקיהו. יהודה וירושלים מאוימות באופן תדיר על ידי ממלכת ישראל, שקיבלה את חסותה של האימפריה האשורית. במהלך בניית חומת ההגנה על המורדות המזרחיים של עיר דוד, מגיעים הבונים לשכבת סלע, ושם נחשפים בפניהם מקדש האבן, המזבח והמצבה. תנסו לדמיין איזה גילוי מרעיש, איזה תזמון מאתגר. בפעם הראשונה מאז יעקב אבינו נמצאים בידי מלך יהודה לא רק הממצאים הפיזיים של יעקב, כלומר המזבח והמצבה, אלא גם המיקום של בית אל, של המקום שהוגדר בית אלוהים בשער השמיים. גילוי כזה יכול להיות מאוד נפיץ, בזמן שכל כך הרבה נתון בו על כפות המאזניים. האם צריך להציג לעם במצב השברירי והמסוכן שבו הוא נמצא את הממצאים שנעלמו במשך זמן כה רב? אולי כעת זה דווקא זמן להתמקד ביציבות ובשמירה על חייהם של תושבי ירושלים, ולשמור בסוד את דבר גילוי המקדש והמצבה לתקופה אחרת, ואולי אפילו לדור אחר שיוכל להתמודד איתו. מה אתם הייתם עושים לו הייתם בנעליים של מלך יהודה? כאשר הארכיאולוג אלי שוקון חשף את המצבה לראשונה בשנת 2010, הוא גילה שהמצבה עדינה כוסתה באדמה רכה בצורה זהירה מאוד, ובמטרה ברורה למנוע ממנה להינזק. המקדש ורצפת האבן כוסו באבנים ונקברו בין חומות ההגנה הרחבות. אלמלא המאמץ הכביר שנעשה כדי לשמר את המצבה ואת מקדש האבן, אין סיכוי שהיינו מוצאים אותם היום בשלמותם. 2,700 שנה חלפו מאז, ולנו נותר רק להרהר בשאלה כבדת המשקל שעמדה בפני מלך יהודה, ואולי, רק אולי, יכול להיות שההחלטה שאותה הוא דחה באותם הימים, היא המשימה שהוא השאיר לדור שלנו לפתור.
Okay, so we have the area of this temple, the stone temple that was located on the eastern slopes of Mount Moriah. We can see that through this these 6 rooms, one of which was a room that contained an altar, a raised platform for an altar, a liquids channel for blood or wine or water, an oil press for making pure oil. Here you can see the oil press. There would have been a beam coming out of here, and stones that would have crushed oil into this depression. An animal pen for holding animals, a pit in which the liquids drained, a matseva, which is the matseva that we have identified, and a place to process and slaughter animals. Now, on the steep slopes in the book of Genesis, Jacob encountered a certain place, Vayifka b'makom, and he took the stones of that place and he placed them around his head, and that night he had the famous dream, the stairway to heaven dream of Jacob, The angels were ascending on the stairway and descending. And he woke up and understood how awesome this place really was. Right over the rooms, however, we found, as it was excavated in 2010, the remnants of an early wall. We didn't really understand that it was a wall because the wall had been broken, breached. There wasn't very much of it left in this area. But to the north, we recently discovered this wall that ran all the way through these rooms, built by King Uzziah. And it was built around 2700 years ago. Now, that was the first time that this stone temple was uncovered. It had been buried almost 1,000 years prior, 800 years prior, and nobody ever had discovered it until it was uncovered by the constructors of this wall. Philip here, who's presently the lead archaeologist, is about 6'3" or 6'4", and this wall would have been at least double this height in its day. So the Matseva was discovered by Eli Shukron. It was covered in very fine loose dirt rather than stones and rubble, and this is the reason for its preservation all these years. It's the only intact artifact that has been discovered in its location intact in the whole of the city of David. Remarkable. Importantly, behind this wall here, or these stones, this is the room here with the altar. This is the matzeva, and this is the room for sacrificing animals, the oil press. So you can see immediately behind these rooms is a water channel and a water reservoir that was constructed in the bedrock that used gravity to flush water into room 1 and room 5. To clean the excrements of blood and animal parts that may be left over following their sacrifice and offerings. So water was sort of structured in a way to rush and flush onto these floors so that the floors could be cleaned. And this is going to become very, very important evidence for us as we go forward. Now, just quickly to recap on these rooms, room 5, this is a room where small animals were tethered. You can see how small they were. Animals can be offered from 8 days old, generally to about 1 year old, mostly unblemished animals. In fact, all unblemished animals are kosher for Jewish sacrifice. This is a picture of a Second Temple rendition. These animal restraints were used to hold the animals down while slaughtering and removing the blood from the animal. And the blood, of course, was offered on the sacrificial altar. This is the stone of Jacob and from Genesis. And this stone which I've set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you shall give me, I will surely give you the 10th. Now Jacob set that stone that night of the famous dream. He then went off to Haran, to the family of his mother and father, where he found his wife, first wife Leah, and then Rachel, who he married. He wanted to marry Rachel first, but he ended up with Leah and Rachel as wives, and they had their 13 kids, and they came, or 12 kids, and they came back to Israel 21 years later, 22 years later, back to this place. At this place, God eventually said to him, "You whose name is Jacob, you shall now be called Jacob no more, your name shall be Israel." And this is where formally Jacob accepts the name Israel upon himself, having taken it from God, and he then builds out Beit El as he had covenanted to God to do, with the setting of this stone and the anointing of the stone 22 years prior to him going out. And the covenant was that if God would bring him back a successful man with a family and kids to this place, then he would make this pillar would be God's house, Beit El. This is the room of the altar. Very, very critical information here. We can see from the famous Rashi that he draws the altar image in his understanding, the northern end, the western end, eastern end, and southern end. And he says that the southeastern end has no base. These corners that you can see over here are the equivalent of these corners here: the southwestern corner, the northwestern corner here, northeastern corner here, and the southeastern corner here. And we can see here there's no wall, there's no base, whereas here on the northeast, northwest, and southwest there is a wall. And therefore this area here, the southeastern corner, has no base, just like Rashi's image. And of course the Gemara in Zvachim 53b asks what is the reason that there was no base on the southeast corner, and essentially it describes how the territory of Judah would come into the territory of Benjamin, and it would occupy 1 cubit of the territory of Benjamin at the southeast corner, at the place where there was no base. As we can see here in Ronnie Reich's drawing, this would be Ein Rogel coming, so this would be the idea that it comes up from Ein Rogel, exactly following this line here, consumes the southeast base, so the area of Judah would consume the southeast corner of the altar and continue to Ein Shemesh, as it would here go down from this point to Ein Shemesh. And then on into the desert. So this marking is almost identical to the way that Ronnie Reich describes it, and clearly it fits the bill in terms of Judah occupying the southeast corner of the altar, consuming 1 cubit of land from Benjamin. Here is a makeup altar that would exist, that would have been constructed from loose rocks or from available rocks from time to time to create an altar, to sacrifice an animal on the altar. This is the morning western sun shining on the altar, and in the Guide for the Perplexed Rambam, the Maimonides brings that undoubtedly all the people of idol worship turned to the east to face the sun. The sun god was their focus. They would never turn their backs to the sun, but the priestly sect that operated here from the time of Melchizedek through now, of course, to Jacob, turned the opposite way to the sacrifice on the western end. And we know from Jewish literature and from our understanding of how Kabbalah and works in Judaism, that the presence of God in the world settles in the west. And here the altar is in the west. It's on the west face of this room, and so the priests offering a sacrifice would have turned their backs to the sun, which is behind them on the east. And in Ezekiel, in Yechezkel, who talks about the future temple, the third temple, he talks how the ramp will face the east. Sometimes there would have been a ramp on for people for the offering to be brought up to the altar, and that in the future this ramp will face to the east, as you can see in this image over here. Okay, we're now coming to the critical end of information, and what's really important here is that this water channel that was discovered, as you can see from here, and in this image here, which ran into room 1 and into room 5, was excavated, and Cambridge University and Wiseman University located some samples from this water channel, organic samples, organic matter that they carbon dated. The primary 2 examples that we're talking about, samples we're talking about here today, are below the water channel here, this set of samples, and above the water channel, this set of samples. Now, of course, the samples below the water channel would have been from the period prior to the channel being constructed, and the samples from above the water channel from the plaster that was set would have been sometime after the channel was constructed. Clearly, the timing and the dates of 1615 to 1545 as the later sample, and the earlier sample being 1535 to 1445, and we'll talk about that extensively in the next slide. Okay, so the dates that Jacob went to Haran, you can see here 1576 before the Common Era, 2185 since creation. This is the next time up from the biblical dates. Jacob left Haran, so this is the 20 odd years that separated, 22 years that separated him from leaving with his wife and his kids and coming back to the location. And then, of course, we know that Benjamin was born in 1553 before the Common Era. And that was after he had been at Beit El, and then they left Beit El to go back to Hebron, where Jacob's mother Rebecca had died. So in this period of time, Jacob comes back to Beit El. Now, what's really interesting is that the sample below the ground here, which is samples X, in this section below the pipe, the drain pipe, or the plaster channel that was manufactured, man-made plaster channel. The latest samples between 1615 and 1545 before the Common Era. Here we go, 1615 to 1545, and all of this, of course, occurs during the time preceding the setting of the channel. So once the channel is set, we have samples W, V, and U, and we start to see W, V, and U here in these samples, and the channel is now in place. 1535. And the later samples of U further up here, once there was dirt accumulating in the channel, and that could have taken 20, 30, 40 years to occur, or 10 years to occur, however long. But nevertheless, those samples are not as close to the channel surface, to the plaster surface, as the W and V. And of course, we can see in 1523, Jacob and his family left into exile in Egypt. And they never returned from Egypt for about 250 years. Israel only came back, the nation of Israel came back into the land 250 years later, and it took another 300 years after that until King David. So this site was not occupied by Israelites until 550 years later. Quite remarkably, we find that the time frames for all of these carbon dated samples completely overlap with the time frames for Jacob being here in Beit El and going away for 20 years and coming back to build the water channel and to turn this into a temple. Beit El means the house of God. That's what Jacob did. He took some stones lying around that place that night. He put them around his head, according to tradition, that these stones came from the altar on which his father Yitzchak or Isaac had been bound, known as Akedah. Now that means that, if this is correct, that the Matzeva, the standing stone, the standing pillar of Jacob, which was set that night, took advantage of the stones that were on the ramp of the altar. The stones, according to Rashi, these stones fused that night, creating one stone, and that is the stone that Jacob set as the Matzeva. Now, if this is the stone of Jacob, the covenant of Jacob, this is the stone that Jacob was named Israel, and that Jacob himself assumed the name Israel. And therefore, this is a holy location, a location in which our forefathers, Jacob, Abram, Isaac, were present. It's likely, therefore, to be the site of Akedah, and that has significant ramifications in Jewish law with regard to the future site of the temple that will be built on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. Thank you for listening. Hopefully this information is informative, and we look forward to seeing the arrival of Mashiach and the construction of the third temple in Jerusalem very soon.